Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. So this is unquestionably one of the biggest mysteries of the entire season, and I'm certainly not the only one to talk about it. I'm definitely not the first either. I'm going to talk a little bit about Rasputin and the lore that indicates a great deal about what the future of his story may lead us to. So, without much delay, let's dig into this lore. For those of you who are in the dark about what all of this is about, I'm going to really quickly assume that you know who Rasputin is, as well as a few other cursory bits of information about the Warmind. Now, to update you all on the lore that's happened more recently with Rasputin, in more recent years, ever since the Warmind expansion in fact, Rasputin has been intent on becoming a greater part of Sol's defense against the returning darkness of the Witness. Things were mostly going well for a time. Rasputin assisted us in a variety of capacities, with Anna Bray becoming the main liaison between the Warmind and the Vanguard. All of this culminated in a stunning victory over Umtek, the Scion who attempted to crash the Almighty into the last city. However, this new trend was not set to last. During the Season of Arrivals, in fact, at the very start of the season, we witnessed Rasputin's deactivation and defeat at the hands of the Black Fleet. This moment was displayed in-game at the time, and I'm pretty sure you can still find the cutscene on Destiny Lore Vault if you've not seen it. I'll see about linking that one in the description if I can find it, which I'm pretty sure I'll be able to. However, this wasn't truly the end of Rasputin. The lore from the Season of Arrivals surrounding Anna Bray tells us about a fragment of Rasputin that survived and was saved. This was done when Jinju, Anna Bray's ghost, was able to momentarily contain a fragment of him, and then was able to beam that fragment into an engram of sorts, known as a pillory engram. Now, as a reminder, engrams are data stored as physical matter. When you have an engram that decrypts into loot, you're essentially seeing the information of that weapon being decoded and turned into physical matter in a form that you understand better as the gun that comes out of your shiny loot drop. Rasputin is therefore able to be somewhat preserved within this engram until Anna can find a solution to return him to a semblance of functionality. To this end, Anna has been working on a prototype exo-frame that Rasputin might be able to inhabit. We saw a little bit of this at the beginning of the Season of Hunt and Beyond Light, but it was literally just a single image showing the beginning of Anna's work on the frame itself, which at the time being was deactivated. During the Season of the Chosen, Season of the Splicer, and Season of the Lost, there was hardly a word on the nature of Rasputin's condition. But I think it's getting to the point where a betting man's wager would be that very soon we're going to see the Warmind re-emerge. The last time we truly saw anything to do with Rasputin was the Season of Arrivals, and prior to that, the Season of the Worthy. So, this is where our story really picks back up again. If you've been playing Witch Queen, you may have completed the Evidence Board quest, and I imagine a fair few of you here have done so, and if you have, I believe you may remember that you can acquire a final note that was passed back and forth between hidden agents and was ultimately left with an unsolved tag, with no open action requirements. Something that the Evidence Board has left us with has given us a clue about what the future is for Rasputin. There are some major discoveries that can be made out of this, and I think we need to listen to it, because I think we can draw some rather distressing conclusions from it. So, take a listen. New intel awaits you on the Evidence Board. The report includes a note from Ikora. To Ikora 006, here's the AI-Com Rasputin protocol transcript we picked up from the Wounds. According to this, before initiating Yuga Sundown, Rasputin killed all protective measures in place for human colonies and settlements. There's a big list of codenames for the Moon, Mars, Earth, the Exodus ships, etc., but Rasputin also refers to a place called Nefele Stronghold. No record of that in any of our databases. Forwarding to Anna Bray for a cross-reference. A follow-up message from Anna Bray brings up more questions than it answers. To Chalco 319. No hit on Nefele Stronghold in any of Rasputin's records. Can't even find the original transcript you're quoting. If it's real, someone removed all traces of it. And if they did it so cleanly that I'd suspect Rasputin himself. No action items on this case, just an unsatisfying label of unsolved. So, let's decipher all of this first, because a lot of that may have gone over some of your heads. This includes the basic hidden IDs for Ikora and Chalco, Chalco being another hidden agent and one of Ikora's close friends. It also includes an identifier for Rasputin, as well as some basic Warmind code phrases and protocols, such as Yuga Sundown. The interesting thing here is that Rasputin, within this protocol, mentions something that we've never heard of, namely Nephele Stronghold. This is significant because Nephele Stronghold is clearly a place. This is where all of this begins to become a whole lot more important. We're going to need to break some of this down piece by piece to really understand what's going on, so let's do that by answering some simple questions. Namely, what is the purpose of Nephele Stronghold, where might Nephele Stronghold be, and what's our next move? The last one of those questions is very important, but we'll circle round to it last. So, one of the many videos that was made before mine on this topic was one by the good Sir Myling Games, who had a theory about this prior to me even touching the topic, and yeah, if you've not seen his video on that, go ahead and take a look. It's an excellent video and it goes over a lot of stuff and detail that I am not covering today. In particular, it's worth watching the beginning of Myling's video where he talks about the history of Rasputin and how Anna Bray actually taught him about morality and philosophy by providing him with a variety of philosophical literature in his AI infancy, if you will, when he was still very young. Rasputin also has unique moral choices that he has made over the timeline of Destiny, and the protocols that he's used to make those moral decisions, or the protocols that he's enacted by making those moral decisions, are things that he's also named. That seems like a bit of a non sequitur and a non-point, but it's actually unbelievably important, because Rasputin naming something gives a little bit of a note as to what's going on with that thing, and Myling talks about this in his video as well. The example that Myling brings up in his video is the example of Siddhartha Golem, which is an excellent one, because it tells us about why Felwinter existed within the world of Destiny, and what Felwinter meant to Rasputin. It's amazing because not only is there great storytelling behind that, but also it proves the bigger point that when Rasputin names something, particularly a protocol or something that generally has Warmind code phrasing, it's named that way for a reason. Another really basic one that I think I can explain, I'm going to go ahead and break down here, is Loki Crown. This one I think a lot of the lore aficionados out there will have heard of. For those of you who haven't, we're going to talk for a second about how the Warmind had a plan to shoot the Traveler. If, seriously, this is the first time you're hearing about that, you will find endless videos on that stuff out there. But basically, this was a plan that Rasputin had, but never enacted, and the protocol to do so would have been Loki Crown. Loki Crown is also a name that I believe holds significance because it pulls from some pretty obvious places in Norse mythology, but also I think potentially from Christianity. The crown part I think is what relates to Christianity, and I'll explain what I think of that in a second, but just know that that's the very nebulous one, and I think that's much more speaking to what I think it might be. This is very much a write and explain what you think you know, as opposed to trying to conduct something outside of my own knowledge which might actually be correct. So, the Loki side of things, I'm fairly certain that when I talk about why Rasputin named this part of the protocol Loki, you can sit there and talk about Loki being the trickster god, and this is Rasputin calling the Traveler out, because this Loki Crown protocol, where it shoots the Traveler, is only supposed to be enacted when the Traveler leaves and abandons humanity, kind of like a trickster god Loki. But I think the crown side of Loki Crown is important because of Christianity, and I think predominantly it's referencing the crown of thorns that was placed on the head of Jesus Christ. And the reason I say that is because it's something that not only represents Jesus Christ being sacrificed, but also it's something which in the Christian story is part of the image of him eventually saving all of mankind from their sins. Similarly, Rasputin shot down the Traveler, hurting it in the same way that Jesus was hurt by the crown of thorns, but also it's one of these moments at which, by shooting at the Traveler, Rasputin might have been able to make it release the ghosts, therefore saving all of mankind. Again, I don't know if that last part of the metaphor and everything actually works out, but I think it does potentially fit in. If there's another thing that the crown side of it could have been, I'm actually really fascinated to know, because the Warmind draws from human culture and philosophy from all over the world, so it's entirely possible that there's another mythological or religious crown out there with some kind of significance that I don't know about that maybe has more of a hint than something that you might find in the Christian story. Just as a really quick addendum to this, by the way, there are lots of points in the last few minutes while I'm talking about the whole Rasputin shot the Traveler thing, where I probably should have made it more clear that, yet again, this was a plan that Rasputin had, but we do not know if Rasputin enacted it. Rasputin probably didn't shoot the Traveler. There is a note that says that this plan was there, ready to be used in case, but we do not know if it was enacted. We are not sure, so just keep that in mind. We do not know definitively that this happened. Anyway, back to the stuff that I didn't insert in the video really quickly for the sake of clarity. All of that being said, this goes back to reinforce the main point, which I feel like I may have strayed a little from, which is quite simply this. When Rasputin names a protocol, it names it for a reason, and you can decipher that reason if you can understand why something is called that particular thing, or if you can break down what those elements mean. Siddhartha Golem, Loki Crown, these are all things that hint at what that protocol is doing. So, let's go ahead and do the same thing to Nephele Stronghold. Myelin also did some great work here on this one. Again, go watch his video on this. But Myelin talks about how Nephele was a Greek deity specifically who was the Nymph of Clouds, and that the main story surrounding Nephele was the story of how she attempted to save her children by sending them to a safe place. Myelin speculates based off of this that Rasputin somewhere had constructed a stronghold of sorts that was used to protect something. He speculated that this could be something that maybe protected one of his backups, or could even be a human colony, but I think the core speculation here is something that is fairly reliable. Yes, it's heavy speculation, but I think the idea at very least that Nephele Stronghold is a place is correct. Now, the exact nature of Nephele Stronghold is still very much up for debate. For starters, we don't know if this is a physical place or a digital domain, which is something that you really could see happening considering that Rasputin, as a warmind, is data predominantly, and is spread out over a vast number of facilities and submines, etc. The Warmind is not in a single place. Wherever there is a Rasputin bunker, Rasputin is active, which is why Rasputin's near death at the hands of the Black Fleet is even more distressing. Because you know what? Yeah, they wiped out almost all of him. More importantly, when it comes to discussing the location of Nephele Stronghold, if it is a physical place, we don't know what kind of physical place it is. The scale is not denoted. It could be some kind of small, self-contained facility, something similar to what we ultimately find when we discover what happened to Fellwinter, such as the Warmind bunkers that we found on Io and on Earth and on the Moon. However, with all of that being said, I think it's also worth noting that it could be larger than that. It could be a sprawling destination where something very important is kept. For all we know, it could even be a fully fledged colony. But I think the one thing that we can clearly speculate on is that whatever Nephele Stronghold is, Rasputin was trying to protect something important there. If we're to take the Nephele myth and its inclusion of Nephele's children being protected in this place as important to the naming of that protocol, then we might have an idea of what's being protected there as either humanity, or perhaps if we're to take the idea of Rasputin's children very literally, more Fellwinter-esque Siddhartha golems, and therefore potentially backups of Rasputin, maybe even whole submines that can help to restore his Warmind network. Which, of course, if you don't know the lore about submines, Rasputin is technically also all the submines. The submines are just different partitions of him that have different responsibilities and are technically still him, but have a degree of autonomy within themselves, and it's kind of at that point where you start to lose your idea of breaking down what a submind is, because we used to think that subminds were warminds all on their own, but it turns out they're not. They're all actually still related to Rasputin, and they're all still a part of his network. It's very much still a part of him. Dividing them into different entities is technically not correct, but it's somewhat easier to look at it that way because they govern and are responsible for different things. Our next question then ends up being, well, where might Nephele Stronghold be? Assuming that it is a physical place and not a digital domain, and whilst we have ventured into digital domains before, and whilst we have looked at various strange things in the universe of Destiny, I think we can at very least start thinking about a physical place before we lose our minds in different realities and dimensions. I think that the text on the evidence board gives us our first clue at locations that Nephele Stronghold probably isn't located at, and as a result I think we can safely cross off Earth, Mars and the Exodus ships, and the Moon as possible locations. We do, however, know that this must have been somewhere that was established before the collapse happened. And why do we know that? Well, because this is information that we got out of the wounds on Mars. Reminder, the wounds on Mars show Mars in its past, meaning that the information we're getting from Rasputin here has been picked up by a past version of Rasputin, which means that it can't have existed in modern day times for us in Destiny. It has to have come from around about the Golden Age or the collapse. This does actually help us as far as understanding what locations we can rule out too is concerned, because that means we can name out a few places such as the Reef and the Awoken Distributory, neither of which had technically been established during the Golden Age. They were established during the collapse, but this would not have given Rasputin enough time to set up somewhere like Nephele Stronghold if we were to include these locations, so I think it's safe to count both of those out. I think also that we can count those out because Rasputin was also tracking the Exodus ships, and that would have included Exodus Green, meaning that Rasputin would probably have known where the distributory was. He just probably would have guarded that secret closely. There is one out-of-the-way possibility that I think gets brought up somewhat regularly, and I think it's worth mentioning, but it's worth mentioning partly also because of a suspicious connection between Rasputin that this has in the oddest of places, namely the Iron Lords. And, in particular, the second Iron Lord that still lives out of the two original that survived the Siva crisis, Lady Aphrodite, although if you asked her, she wouldn't necessarily consider herself to be an Iron Lord anymore, and that's because she is a pacifist now. Why? Because after the Iron Lords were destroyed, Aphrodite joined a hidden colony of pacifist guardians out beyond the system's better-known regions. I think this is a possible contender for the location of Nephele Stronghold, but I say that purely because of the fact that it's the only example we know of a hidden or established location of humans that is genuinely hidden to us, and also the Iron Lord connection is very tantalizing. But again, I don't know if we can truly establish that that is the place. I think it provides interesting story hooks if it is, but I don't buy it necessarily. I would put my money on it if I was a betting man, but that's only because we don't know any better. It could just be a place we've never heard of. Also, on this note of places we have heard of, to put a little bit more of an educated guess into the air, I don't think we're looking at Venus or Mercury, both of which have been reasonably explored by us and have been overrun by the Vex or abducted by the Darkness. I also don't think we're looking at somewhere near Saturn or Jupiter, and that's because this place was hidden, or was meant to be hidden. Colonies such as Titan, which orbits Saturn, were very well established metropolitan colonies, and I think it's unlikely that a place of sanctuary, which was meant to be hidden away from everything, would be close to a really populated planet. A major population center such as Titan absolutely qualifies like this. There would be more traffic, more things to track if you were the Darkness, and more things to potentially intercept. As a result, I think we can also rule out the larger Galilean moons of Jupiter, such as Ganymede or Europa or even Io, as a possible set of locations. Ganymede falls into that same kind of category as Titan, potentially would have been a major metropolitan area given that it's the largest moon of Jupiter, and probably would have been in this place where it would have been a prime candidate for human colonization. Europa, I think, would have been avoided too, considering the colonization efforts made by Clovis Bray back in the Golden Age, even if it wasn't as likely to have been colonized. Although, who knows, maybe it is on Europa because, well, we have the destination, and After all, Bungie's done stranger things than tacking on a little bit of extra stuff. I mean, they did it with Nessus and the land tank. It's not impossible that one day the Darkness fleet just arrives and cracks open a bit of the ice, and lo and behold, it was right next to the Deepstone Crypt all along. But still, I'm a betting man, and I don't necessarily know if I bet on that immediately. I also don't necessarily know if I bet on Io, and the reason for that is because of the fact that Io was the most recent planet terraformed by the Traveller, which means there wasn't as much time for development. But even then, you can make a very strong counter-argument against that, because there was a Warmind bunker on Io, a significant one too, as well as Warmind launch points. Rasputin really was all over the place. Not to mention, the Warmind bunker was actually multi-tiered and multi-leveled, and you could find it all over the place, and Rasputin clearly left certain beacons out there. I mean, yeah, Io is actually fairly reasonable as a possibility, but even then, it's questionable whether the Darkness returns Io, or whether the Darkness is capable of returning Io at that point. So maybe this is possible, but I think I'd take any suggestions of that with a little bit of a pinch of salt as well. Location-wise, where we can find Nephele Stronghold is still the most persistent mystery of this entire video topic. The most pressing thing of all, however, is what happens next in the story with this, and I think it's here where the story's urgency is really something that will come into play. You see, Rasputin didn't deliver this information to us willingly. This information was picked up by the Hidden along with protocol transcripts of Rasputin from one of the wounds on Mars's surface. That means we need to understand a little bit more about those wounds, and when you do know a little bit more about them, this is going to be a cause for intense alarm. Rasputin never intended for these transmissions to be picked up is the short version of it, but more importantly is who would have picked those up and who was potentially looking for them. During our investigation into the Throne World, Mars, and the Relic, we learned several things about the wounds that have been left on Mars. For those of you who don't remember, the wounds are those wounds in time that show us remnants of the Golden Age past on Mars. The report of the Relic, which we read after completing some of the evidence board quests, starts to really give us a little bit of a better look into these things. So, first of all, here's that report on the Relic, or at least the pertinent sections of it. You confirmed that the Relic, when paired with weapon patterns, allows the user to reach through time, rearranging memories into weaponry. There's no telling what else it can do in the hands of a powerful entity like the Witness. Ikora posited before that the Relic caused the temporal wounds on Mars' surface. You believe she's right, and that the Witness used the device to learn about the planet's golden age and collapse, leaving Mars irreversibly damaged. Your report states that the weapon patterns you used are essentially darkness-infused memory roadmaps to the weapons the Relic creates. The Relic is clearly capable of anything from creating weapons to tearing the fabric of reality. This is the thing that concerns me. Here we basically learn that the Relic was used by the Witness on Mars specifically to find out what was going on in the past of Mars in the Golden Age and the collapse. This idea is further supported by the evidence board and its notes on DeepSight that we explore a little bit more with Eris, which states the following. The nature of this power supports our hypothesis that darkness is specially bound to the consciousness that stretches in webs across space and time. This makes it uniquely useful for an investigatory process. However, we have not yet fully explored its utility for reflection. Savathun's altar is one example of DeepSight's potency in this regard. The wounds spanning the desert suggest the Witness engaged in a similar process with Mars, retreading old ground to forge new paths in the future. And this is what really worries me. If the Witness was using the Relic to discover why it failed in the collapse and to reforge new paths using knowledge having been gained from retreading old ground, suddenly you can start to put two and two together. This is the potential chain of causality for all of this. If the Witness was using the Relic to discover why it failed in the collapse before, it might be looking at what Rasputin was doing to counter it. Perhaps more importantly, we need to bring it back to Nephele Stronghold. This protocol that we picked up from Rasputin was picked up by the Hidden coming out of one of the wounds on Mars, which means that it happened in the past, which means that the Witness might know about it too, which means that the Witness might also know about the existence of Nephele Stronghold, and might also understand that it has been erased from the records of Rasputin, or alternatively, might notice that Nephele Stronghold has been absent from further communications past that point. If that's the case, then we have to once again examine the Witness's motives and realize, yet again, that the best speculation by the Hidden and Ikora is that the Witness was using the relic on Mars to discover why it was defeated in the collapse. If Nephele Stronghold had anything to do with that, the Witness is also looking for it. So now, if all of that holds true, and a lot of it is speculative, but if it does, we're on a ticking clock. We need to find Nephele Stronghold and understand what Rasputin was trying to protect there before the Witness reaches it and has a chance to either destroy it or worse, use it against us, to corrupt us, or to corrupt it. Whatever it is, it seems pressing enough that the Warmind was willing to completely hide it. This is Rasputin. It doesn't hide anything without good reason. It may have tried to shatter everything that the darkness threw at it and may have been unsuccessful, but this is a being of such unbelievably incredible power that we should not disregard it. Rasputin was easily able to best the Vex, and they are an entity that has spanned time and space and used causal mathematics to an effect that is terrifying, and Rasputin was able to best them with relative ease. So keep that in mind. Rasputin is powerful, even in a destroyed or somewhat degraded state. It is worth us following up on this, and I have a feeling, as I'm sure many of you do, that this is going to be what happens in the next season, or maybe the season after that. At some point, the Warmind is going to re-emerge in the story, and when it does, I would keep an eye out for a new kind of mini location somewhere along the lines of Nephele Stronghold. If that does happen, we're in for a very, very interesting time. But that's all from me for now. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about the Warmind and Anna Bray's efforts to restore it, I'm going to be covering that in our next video. To go ahead and see that one, go ahead and hit subscribe. The script is already underway, and yeah, I'll be finishing that up the day that this releases. Also, of course, if you have your own thoughts, leave them down below in the comments section. If you want to go ahead and leave a like, you can go ahead and do so, and remember that, as per usual, your viewership as always is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Parodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.